Wonderful. You're all ready to hear Vicki. We'll get through the business as quickly as possible. So I'll call this meeting to order, and I will ask Zelda Boucher if she will lead us in prayer.
Gracious Heavenly Father, we come to you tonight with grateful hearts. We worship and bow down. We kneel before you as our Maker. We ask for your guidance and direction as we elect new officers tonight. We ask for your help and guidance that they may conduct the business of this society in a manner that is pleasing to you. We praise your name for the freedom of this country and the opportunity that we all have to vote. We ask your wisdom in the election of those officers as well. In your precious Son's name, I pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. I want to extend greetings to all of our members and to all of our guests. We have a lot of guests tonight. We have some guest families, and we have some guest Cub Scouts. Would all of our visitors tonight please stand up for a minute? Thank you. We are very happy to have you here. We surely do hope this is going to be the first of many meetings that you attend. Now, at this time, I'd like to have minutes from our Secretary, Josette McCreary.
The monthly meeting of the Smith County Historical Society was held in Payne Auditorium on October 3rd, 2000. Weldon Holcomb opened the meeting with prayer. President Mary Jane McNamara welcomed the visitors to the meeting and invited them to join the society. The minutes of the September meeting were read and approved. Sam Kidd gave the treasurer's report, copies of which were provided. President McNamara announced that former employee Jean Whiteside would be returning to work at the museum on Monday, October 9, 2000. The nominating committee for the year 2001 consists of Weldon Holcomb, Chairman Mary Jane McNamara, and Alex Bill. Chairman Holcomb announced the following slate of officers: Mary Jane McNamara, President; Eric Jensen, First Vice President in charge of programs; Sam Kidd, Treasurer; Josette McCreary, Recording Secretary; Zelda Boucher, Second Vice President, Museum. The Board of Governors nominees are Carol Godwin, Max Freeman, and Terry Combs. The Society has been gifted with a very generous amount of memorabilia from the Murdoch family of Tyler. This gift was made by Dr. Julian Murdoch, his wife Ruth Murdoch, and his son John Murdoch, and consists of beautiful Chinese items such as clothing, books, and pictures, etc., and will make a wonderful exhibit for our museum. We're very appreciative to the Murdoch family. President McNamara announced the need for a capital fundraising campaign for the Society. Although the City of Tyler owns the building that houses our museum, the maintenance on the building is the responsibility of the Society. The outside of the building needs painting, and in order to accomplish this, we must hire a company that is qualified to paint historical buildings. A motion was made by Max Freeman that we initiate a capital fundraising campaign for the enhancement of this historic building. The motion was seconded by Ashton Orovitz. A question was asked concerning the cost of painting the outside of the building. In 1998, a bid was taken of $8,500. President McNamara advised that nearly 3 years later, the cost may be as much as $10,000, and she would like to see that amount raised. Also, the officers of the Society feel that we should go outside our membership and take this appeal to the general public, as well as investigate possible grants. The motion passed. The Society is planning an antique fashion show during the Rose Festival weekend. Old clothing will be displayed from the 1880s through World War II, and mannequins will be set up on the main floor of the museum. James Wilkins announced the program for November will be Vicki Betts, who will speak on mass desertion of officers and guards at Camp Ford. Sam Kidd asked that all checks or cash donated to the fundraising campaign be earmarked as such in order to properly credit this account. Mary Jane McNamara introduced the program for the evening. The Cone Girls, Ina Hope McKay, Annabelle Culpepper, Thea Jean Dean, Edna McCrary, Thelma Culpepper, and Marjorie Tomlinson spoke on growing up in Noonday. Following the program, President McNamara thanked Carol Godwin for the refreshments provided. A motion was made and seconded that the meeting be adjourned. Respectfully submitted, Josette McCrary, Recording Secretary.
Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes? If not, they'll stand approved as read. May we have a treasurer's report? I know that Sam printed reports and left them over here.
Here they are.
Great. Everyone who would like to see a report, there are plenty of copies available to you. May we have a report from the Publications Committee? Andy?
No report tonight.
May we have a report from the Camp Ford Committee? Randy?
Walking trails are finished. No works today, Saturday. We're getting real close to being complete out there.
Wonderful. May we have a report from the Archives Committee? Gretchen?
We've had some awfully nice young men and women from the PJC history class who have been up helping in our archives and learning just what an archives is. And we have had a very nice time with them, and they should have been helpful. And I've also had my husband there. He has been helping out on the computer and email for us.
Without Bob's help, we would have 992 old ads stuck on the wall. People act out, anything in the world. Crazy stuff. May we have a report from the membership committee, Zelda?
No, I don't believe I have anything now.
All right. The museum, I'd like to recommend to all of you that you come down. We extended the time on our exhibit because during the Rose Festival, not very many people wanted to come in and see the exhibit. But since then, we've had a steadily increasing trickle of visitors to see our antique clothing. And you know, what people wore 110 and 120 years ago is pretty interesting. They were very small people. Very small people. God. But you might like to see it. And I had a report, a progress report about painting. Now, one time, Kevin says, we're going to paint. And Bob Turner says, take bids, and when it's done, send us the bill. You know, so we are not doing away with the capital fundraising efforts. If they pay the bill as specified, there are lots of other things we need. But I would like to report to you that's where we are at the moment. At this time, I would like to have Weldon Holcomb, the chairman of the nominating committee, give his report so that we may have an election. Weldon.
Thank you, Madam President. I believe that the proper way to do this would be to do each individual nominee as recommended by the committee, but the chair would request the unanimous consent of the group present that we do this all at one time, and so we just have one vote. I would at this time request that we have unanimous consent to offer the slate as an entirety instead of individually.
So moved. Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposition? Thank you. The committee recommends President Mary Jane McNamara, Vice President Programs Eric Jensen, Vice President Museum Zelda Boucher, Vice President Camp Forward Randy Gilbert, Treasurer Sam Kidd, Recording Secretary Josette McCrary, Corresponding Secretary Linda Allen Terry Combs, Board of Governors Carol Godwin and Max Freeman. I believe each one of these people to be well qualified, and each one of them have signified their willingness to accept the responsibility. Are there any other nominations for any other positions? Are there any other nominations? Are there any other nominations? Hearing none, I declare the nominations closed. All in favor of the slate submitted as read by the chair, please hold up your hand. Either one. All opposed? Same sign. Thank you. It is therefore ordered that the new officers will be those read by the chair and submitted to this meeting. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you very much, Melvin. We hope that we make all kinds of good progress in the coming year. And, lots of good things can happen. For instance, it's been very nice to have Gene Whiteside back. And at this time, I would like to tell you, just before we get to the program, that Carol Godwin is going to have something to say to you about the Christmas program right after our program. The Christmas program is going to be food. Think of that. Scintillating, isn't it? Okay. Then at this time, I would like to turn the program over to James Wilkins, who will introduce Vicki Betts.
This is your lame duck program, Chairman. I think I'll survive. I'm glad you're here tonight. The weather's against us. It's everybody must surely want to know who's ahead. At any rate, you could find that out shortly, and I'm glad you came because the program, with the knowledge that I have of Vicki Betts, of long years' experience, is going to be interesting and innovative, and I guarantee you something that you don't know. The GRIR Fund, if you got one of those treasurer's reports, has the largest amount of any of the funds. And I was privileged to be appointed to that when the fund was started in 1975 with a gift from Wilton and Imogene Fair to the Historical Society in honor of Jack Greer. $50,000 of which we would use the interest to do projects of a larger nature, maybe than the Historical Society ordinary program would encompass. And so that was on December the 24th, 1975, and we started looking for our first project. And in 1977, the first project with the money from those funds was used to publish a book by Vicki Betts entitled Smith County, Texas in the Civil War. And it was a significant piece of research in 1977. It still stands on its feet today. And we were fortunate to kick off a long series of projects with that. Then in 1990, the Greer Fund underwrote a trip to Washington, D.C. to the National Archives for Vicki Betts and Randy Gilbert to find material on Camp Forward that had never been found before, collect it, make copies of it, bring it back, and that trip was accomplished. That's the second thing that Vicki did, and Randy. That was a significant contribution to Smith County history. Vicki's been a member of this Historical Society since she was in high school. She's an astute researcher. She is professionally a librarian at the University of Texas at Tyler. And if you've written anything that if you've read anything that she's written, or if you've ever heard her make her speech, you know how much research goes behind every statement that she says or writes down. It's authenticated. She can tell you where it came from, and it will be right. And so we're delighted now to have a story, an untold story of a desertion at Camp Ford. You know, the prisoners were always trying to dig out and escape. This was a desertion, a mass desertion, led by a young man named Nick Hardeman. And Vicki has found all sorts of things to tell us about that. Vicki?
The way we found this story was that trip to Washington, D.C., when we were going through the orders that were coming out of Houston. And we kept running across this little incident, and then that's where I took off on this research topic. It always sat back in my mind saying, this would make a good story. I bet there's more to it. I call this A Serious Affair. Nick Hardeman Deserts the Confederate Army. The Austin newspaper printed a special correspondence from Tyler, dated July 29, 1864. Editor Gazette. About a week ago, 150 men of Colonel Anderson's regiment who were guarding the federal prisoners near here organized under a lieutenant and left. Their horses had come in from grazing the day before, and they are well armed and mounted. Colonel Anderson endeavored to overtake them with a small force and induce or compel them to return, but was unable to overtake them. They deserted in open day, fell into line at the sound of the trumpet, and are by this time on the frontier, I presume. For a day or two, the Federals were very insecurely guarded, and some apprehensions were felt that they would escape and do much damage, but all is safe now. What should be the punishment for men so lost to honor as to desert their post, leaving 3,000 or 4,000 miscreants almost unguarded in the heart of the country, thus endangering the lives and property of the whole country to pillage and slaughter? The federal prisoners mentioned in this article were, of course, at Camp Ford, and the lieutenant was Second Lieutenant G.N. Nick Hardeman, 18 years old, of Matagorda County. Why would he desert, and what happened to him? I've searched through records from Austin to Bay City to Washington, D.C., and while I found some of the answers, other key points remain a mystery. Nick Hardeman was no ordinary Texas farm boy. His father was D. Hardeman, who moved to Texas in 1845 from Tennessee and points in between to join his extended family. 10 years earlier, in 1835, 45 Hardemans, led by Nick's great-uncles Bailey, Peter, and Thomas, all veterans of the Battle of New Orleans, had moved to Texas, receiving grants along Caney Creek in what is now Matagorda County. Bailey Hardeman assisted in writing the Declaration of Independence for the Republic of Texas, as well as its Constitution, and served as the Republic's first Secretary of the Treasury. 4 of Nick's first cousins, once removed, fought in the Army of the Republic of Texas, including one at San Jacinto. A brother-in-law and 4 cousins fought in the Mexican War, mostly with McCulloch's Rangers. As we will see, the family will also be well represented in the Confederate Army. The family also enjoyed outstanding political and social connections. His grandmother was a friend of Martha Washington. His parents attended Andrew Jackson's inaugural party at the Hermitage in Nashville. One great aunt was also the aunt of President James K. Polk. A Missouri cousin was a close friend of Thomas Hart Benton, while another was the first governor of the state of California and a friend of John C. Fremont. As you might expect, the family was quite wealthy. After the rest of the Hardeman clan gradually moved away from the coast to claim land, D. Hardeman took their place in Matagorda County, where his eldest daughter, Sally Ann, married her first cousin once removed, Samuel H. Hardeman, son of Bailey Hardeman. In the 1859 tax rolls, D owned almost 3,000 acres, worth $42,529, or almost $14.26 per acre, well above the state average. He owned 49 slaves, plus his wife owned 12 in her own right, which placed them comfortably within the planter aristocracy of Texas. They kept 30 horses, 75 cattle, and 1 carriage. However, about that same year, D. Hardeman decided to sell out and move elsewhere. Exactly where, I'm not sure, although I do know where he was in 1864. By 1860 tax rolls, he only reported 711 acres, and he didn't appear in the 1861 Matagorda County tax rolls at all. D. Hardeman was a staunch Democrat. He represented his region to the State Democratic Convention in 1859. The local newspaper called him a warm supporter of the Democratic nominees against the Sam Houston powwow. He does not know a man in his neighborhood who will vote for Houston. Nick was the 9th child of 11, 5 boys, 6 girls, although 4 of the children had died early and the 3 oldest girls had married. That left D. Jr., Dickerson, Martha Evelyn, Nick, and William Perkins at home when the war began. Not long after Fort Sumter, on June 13, 1861, Captain E.S. Rugeley formed the Caney Rifles, in which one of Nick's brothers-in-law served as 3rd lieutenant, and his 2 brothers and another brother-in-law served as privates. 5 weeks later, this group reorganized as the Caney Mounted Rifles, which later became Company D, Reuben Brown's Regiment, Texas Cavalry. Nick's 2 brothers soon left the Rifles. D. Jr. joined the Terry's Texas Rangers, and Dickerson joined the 4th Texas Cavalry, part of Sibley's brigade. One Hardeman cousin became a major in the Quartermaster Corps, another a captain in the 28th Texas Cavalry of Walker's Texas Division, another served in the 16th Texas Infantry, and another in Hood's Texas Brigade. The highest-ranking family member was Nick's cousin, William Polk Hardeman, who rose to Brigadier General by the end of the war. William Polk Hardeman was Samuel's first cousin as well as his stepfather. Within the last week or so, I've talked to a family member who lives in Washington, D.C., and he says that this whole family is a case of you are your own grandpa. Everybody was marrying everybody around. In 1861, Nick was only 15 years old, but he made regular trips out to Camp Winston near Matagorda Bay, where Brown's regiment was stationed. His sister, Sally, sent letters, boxes, and jars of goodies to her husband, Samuel, and Samuel sent Nick back with letters, redfish, oyster, and seashells. He may have picked up the measles in camp. He was sick for New Year's Day, 1862. D. Sr. visited the part of the family remaining in Matagorda County from time to time and sent bolts of cloth when he could. He wrote them letters from Fairview, although at this point I don't know if that's a plantation name or one of several towns called Fairview listed in the Handbook of Texas. In one letter, he suggested that Samuel, I think he was talking to Samuel, go and see General and Mrs. B in San Antonio. They are my most intimate friends. In March 1863, Samuel, now age 42, received an honorable discharge from the Army, and the correspondence slacked off for a while. However, by late January 1864, he again rejoined Brown's cavalry. At about the same time, Philip Fulcrod from Goliad formed Fulcrod's Cadet Cavalry, presumably from young men not quite old enough for the regular service, among them Nick Hardeman. As soon as the command got together, General B ordered 1 company to picket duty on the coast, 4 companies under Colonel Fulcrod went west to arrest deserters, and 1 company went to Columbia to act as couriers. As of February 14, 1864, 3 more companies were in the process of being raised, but that may not have been accomplished. In early April, the commands of Philip Fulcrod and John Pelham Border were combined, with Colonel Thomas Scott Anderson, formerly with the 6th Texas Infantry, placed in command. From that point on, the unit would be known as Anderson's Borders Cavalry. On April 11th, immediately after the battles of Mansfield and Pleasant Hill, Border received orders to take his battalion from their camp on the Lavaca River to Camp Ford to assist in guarding the anticipated influx of thousands of new prisoners. Nick wasn't in camp at the time. He was again quite sick, but was well enough to accompany the regiment north in early May. Colonel Anderson arrived in Tyler on May 13th to replace Colonel R.T.P. Allen. He found Sid Richardson's company of Walter P. Lane's Rangers already guarding at Camp Ford, but anxious to join the fighting at the front. They would not consider handing over their arms to their replacements. For a while, the veterans and the young raw recruits overlapped. W.W. Hartzell, one of the veterans, was not impressed. One of Anderson's regiment managed to kill himself by an accidental discharge of his gun within a half an hour of going on duty for the first time. Nick arrived at Camp Ford during the absolute worst period of Camp Ford's history. The Mansfield and Pleasant Hill prisoners had already arrived, necessitating enlarging the stockade. On May 21st, another almost 500 came in from Arkansas. 6 days later, 540 returned after the Red River Campaign canceled their anticipated exchange, making a total of 4,400 men within the walls. 10 days later, another 160 arrived. The new prisoners were provided with no shelter from the early summer sun and heat. Sanitation became an immediate problem. Anderson placed border in control of Camp Ford, and Border's adjutant, Lieutenant B.W. McEachern, I'm not sure how that's pronounced, McEachern, is that right, Randy? Do you know? Soon became the tyrant of the stockade. The tension between the guards and the prisoners, and even in the outside community, was intense. On May 18th, Holcomb, Reed, and McReynolds were removed from the Smith County Jail and lynched. On May 22nd, one of Anderson's men shot and killed a prisoner, allegedly for cursing him, although others denied the excuse. 5 prisoners escaped on June 6th, but were captured 3 days later. On June 22nd, a Yankee was found shot dead in the woods, where he had gone after brush. After that, the Federals hired the Confederate guards to go out with them. The next day, a slave woman was whipped severely in full view of the prisoners, as if proving the powerlessness of the abolitionist Federals to protect her. The prisoners somewhat broke the tension on the 4th of July when they held an Independence Day celebration, including music, speeches, and the possible brief raising of a hidden U.S. flag. A few days later, about 1,000 of the earliest prisoners were paroled and marched toward Shreveport for exchange, easing the overcrowding somewhat. Still, on July 11th, a guard killed a Yankee for cursing him, and on the 15th, a prisoner killed his messmate. Nick's first commander, Philip Fulcrod, was ordered to Tyler to stand court-martial for some unknown reason, perhaps something he did in reaction to losing his command. At sunrise on July 16th, the veterans of Walter P. Lane's Rangers joyfully bid farewell to Camp Ford, heading east to Marshall and then Shreveport, leaving the prisoners under the care of the hated Lieutenant McEachern and the recruits of Anderson's Borders Cavalry, many of them still in their teens. All in all, this was probably not what Nick Hardeman had in mind when he joined the Confederate Army. As the Austin newspaper originally stated, on Tuesday, July 19th, the cavalry forces were brought in from pasture. On Wednesday, July 20th, the trumpet sounded, the men, many of them only boys, mounted their horses and headed west. While the Austin paper said 150 men deserted their post, Colonel Scott Anderson put the number at Lieutenant Hardeman and 98 additional men. Only a couple of POW diaries exist for that period. On the 20th, Captain William McKinney, 19th Kentucky Infantry, noted, quite a number of the guards desert, 160 in number. Jacob W. Paulin, 130th Illinois Regiment, wrote in his diary, 163 Rebs deserted from this camp this morning. The authorities started after the deserters, but don't hear from them. He added for the following day, 60 rebels from Tyler deserted, taking with them a 6-pounder, joining those left this camp yesterday. I have not found any other reference to this second desertion. You may have just misinterpreted some movement of the guards. Anderson sent Captain Gus Patton, Company G, with 2 lieutenants and 40 men in pursuit, and also ordered a courier to ride to the nearest telegraph office, which was in Henderson, with a telegram to be sent to Houston. The next day, headquarters of the District of Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona issued the following. Colonel Bradford will proceed forthwith, exclusive of Mann's battalion via Bastrop and Austin to Fredericksburg and use all means to intercept Lieutenant Hardiman and 100 men deserted from Colonel Anderson's command, Tyler, on yesterday. Colonel Bradford will leave sufficient number of men at points on the road from Bastrop to Fredericksburg to surprise and capture the men, who will march in an irregular and loose manner. Also to communicate with each other so that chase can be made in any direction the deserters may take. The officers and men under your command will shoot down without hesitation any of these men, and particularly the officers, should they attempt to escape or offer the least show of resistance. Colonel Bradford will use the utmost vigilance and activity to intercept and capture the deserters. The safety and honor of the country require it. The movement will be made without the least delay, no officer or man being permitted to carry any baggage except a change of clothing. Commissary supplies will be found at Bastrop and Austin. Commanding officer is authorized to call upon the commanding officer of the state troops at Fredericksburg for supplies and request him to furnish them for temporary purposes which will be paid for or returned in kind at the earliest moment. Captain Poole's company, unattached cavalry, will proceed to Bastrop and operate from there. Colonel Bradford will proceed to Austin and be guided by developments of the movements of these deserters. If he heard of the deserters being south of Fredericksburg, he need not proceed to that point. He will report progress from time to time and make the utmost haste to return to his post and bring the deserters to Columbus in irons or tied. General J.E. Slaughter, Chief of Staff, informed Lieutenant Colonel Fulcrod, who was in Houston at that time, about the mass desertion from his former unit. Fulcrod responded the next day. This subject has ever since been one of very painful reflection to me. I have thought that I could advance the service if I were permitted to go in search of them. The relations of the men have been such to me that I think I could induce them to return to their duty with comparatively little trouble. As you are aware, I am at present under arrest and of course cannot act unless permitted. I have seen nothing to indicate that Fulcrod was allowed to go after his men. Within 3 or 4 days, 7 of the deserters evidently saw the error of their ways and returned to Camp Ford voluntarily. These men were put into close quarters. Late on Friday night, the 22nd, Colonel N.H. Darnell, commanding the post at Dallas, received information that the deserters had reached the vicinity of Butler's Bridge on the east fork of the Trinity River in Dallas County and were making their way to the frontier. Darnell called together Captain Smith's company of the Reserve Corps, a part of Captain W.H. Darnell's company, and as many of the government operatives and citizens as could get arms, numbering in all about 80 men, who started in pursuit about 2 o'clock on Saturday afternoon. They found tracks at the crossing of the Trinity River at Cedar Springs and trailed them all night, coming up on the men a little before daylight on Sunday morning a few miles southwest of Cedar Hill, where they had camped. They were able to capture the whole party, except for about 20 who had left the group before they reached Dallas County, and Nick Hardiman and 7 or 8 others who made their escape. Captain Patton and a squad of men from Tyler met Colonel Darnell's company after the capture and returned with them to Dallas on Sunday afternoon. Patton took charge of the prisoners, escorting them back to Tyler on Tuesday, July 26th, and placing them in the guardhouse. The Dallas Herald declared that the whole affair was well arranged and carried out and reflects much credit on the promptness and energy of Colonel Darnell, as well as on the soldiers, the operatives of the government troops at this place, and the citizens, all of whom responded with alacrity to the call of Colonel Darnell for men. Colonel Anderson reported to Houston that most of the deserters had been returned, and Major General Walker ordered a court-martial to be convened at Tyler. He instructed Anderson to choose 8 or 10 of the ringleaders to bring before the court, but at that point, none of the instigators had been captured. The men who returned voluntarily or who had been captured at Dallas would all later be released. On August 3rd, Houston was still ordering Captain Poole with a detachment of 15 men to pursue with all haste and arrest the deserters, Lieutenant Hardiman and 10 men, the rest having been arrested, they will be sent to Tyler, Texas. A week later, headquarters ordered Captain Louis Beckwith of Colonel Anderson's Regiment of Cavalry to pursue to Colonel Ford's command on the Rio Grande, Lieutenant Hargrove, as should be Hardiman, and men of his company. He will arrest and prefer charges against Lieutenant Hargrove, which should be Hardiman, collect the men of his company, and proceed with them to Tyler and report to Colonel T.S. Anderson. Sometime during the month of August, Nick Hardiman was arrested and incarcerated in the guardhouse at either Houston, according to a letter from his sister, or in Milliken, which comes from Anderson's letter, or perhaps he was moved from one to the other. By that time, his father, D. Sr., had fallen dangerously ill of congestive fever at his new home in Burleson County. And this is from a letter from his daughter. His physician said it was not possible for him to recover. Dee's daughter, Sally, wrote her husband, Sam, in Brown's Cavalry, begging him to get a furlough to assist her mother. You know how helpless Ev and Ma will be amongst total strangers without anyone to advise them. Pa was in a great deal of trouble about Nick, who is under arrest in Houston, but I will not here repeat the particulars of his case, for I suppose you have heard them before this. Poor, misguided young man, I am afraid it will be a serious affair for him. D. Hardiman died later that month in Burleson County, but I've been unable to find his grave. His attorney, William Pitt Ballinger, wrote in his diary, Colonel D. Hardiman died recently. No better man is left behind. If I knew the facts, I would write a biographical sketch of him. The Austin Daily Telegraph called him one of the oldest and widest known of Texas citizens. Instead of Sam, another son-in-law, William F. Davis, requested leave on August 28th to go to Nick's mother. My father-in-law has just died, leaving his family in Burleson County in an unprotected condition, having no male on the premises and a large number of slaves, most of whom are now sick. His sons are all in the Army and remote from home to give their mother the immediate attention which her condition requires. The length of time asked for is barely sufficient to remove my mother-in-law to Matagorda County, from whence she removed to Burleson County on the appearance of the enemy last winter. She can there receive the attention her situation requires from her friends who are too old to be in the Army. Sam Hardiman's company had been transferred to near Harrisburg, so he was near Nick. He wrote his wife on September 6th that William Davis would be seeing Nick the following day and that he hoped to see him in a day or two himself. 5 days later, he wrote her that Wiggins had been to see Nick on the 9th, that he had been sick but was now fat and hearty and will have a chance of getting home before long. Evidently, Davis wasn't so confident because Sally wrote her husband that, I feel more anxious about the termination of his case since I saw Mr. Davis. Do write me what you think about it and how he bears his troubles. It was now time to bring in the family's wide connections to try and influence the impending court-martial. Confederate Congressman Claiborne C. Herbert of Colorado County informed Lieutenant Governor Stockton Donnelly of the situation. Donnelly wrote Major General John G. Walker, commander of the District of Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona. Being informed by the Honorable C.C. Herbert that Lieutenant N. Hardiman is held in arrest with the possibility of charges being presented against him of insubordination, and knowing something of the command to which he was formally attached, I take the liberty of joining others in making the request that he be released upon the grounds and reasons stated by the President of the Confederate States in General Order 139 of 1863, issued from General Cooper's office. Now, this proclamation of pardon and general amnesty had been extended to all absentees except those twice convicted of desertion who should return to their proper commands within 20 days after publication of the amnesty in the state in which these absentees might be. But that was a year earlier, and I'm not sure how this applies to Nick. Donnelly continued his letter by explaining that the battalion to which Lieutenant H. was first attached was of boys, and raised by Lieutenant Colonel Fulcrod during last fall and winter. Donnelly had been in the area during the winter and spring and visited the camp. The officers were inexperienced, and the young men had not been trained in military discipline. Lieutenant Colonel Fulcrod was frequently off on detached service, and the examples then exhibited to them in old regiments and among men of mature age, on the contrary, was so calculated to provoke insubordination among them that it was a frequent subject of remark with others as well as myself. I take the liberty, therefore, to join in the request that Lieutenant Hardeman be discharged, or at least that you exercise in advance your authority to consider his case, and know whether his is not one in which your discretion might be exercised to dismiss the prosecution. Less than a week later, on September 26th, Sam wrote his wife that, I went to see Mrs. Sarah Wharton. She was the mother of Confederate Major General John Austin Wharton, who was at Mr. Leonard Gross's near Hempstead. That's Leando Plantation. She told me that she had been to see General Walker, the commander of the Department of Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona. It feels like I'm dropping names everywhere, and I think that's what they were doing too. And that he had promised to do all he could for Nick consistent with the duties of his office. Mr. Gross told me that he had spoken to Colonel Scott Anderson, and he thought that there would be no great difficulty about the case. Colonel Anderson is the colonel from under whose command the cadets deserted. His wife is Mary McNeil, an old acquaintance of mine. The McNeils and the Hardemans had moved from Tennessee to Texas together. I got Mrs. Wharton to agree to talk to Colonel A. I assure you that what Mr. Gross told me took a great weight off my mind, for I felt much grief about it. Nick is fat and hearty and sends his love to Betsy and Catherine Chapman. If Mrs. Wharton did indeed talk to Colonel Anderson, she did not convince him to drop the charges. On September 29th, he requested that Lieutenant Hardeman be tried upon the charges preferred. On October 4th, 1864, Special Order Number 24 was issued. A general court-martial is hereby appointed to convene at Brenham, Texas, on Tuesday, the 11th of October, 1864, at 10 o'clock a.m., or as soon thereafter as practicable, for the trial of Lieutenant G.W. Hardeman of Anderson's regiment and such other prisoners as may be brought before it. The court will sit without regard to hours. Detail of the court: Colonel Henry M. Elmore, 20th Texas Infantry, President; Lieutenant Colonel James Wrigley, Timmins Regiment Infantry; Lieutenant Colonel Patrick Henry Swearingen, 24th Texas Cavalry Dismounted; Lieutenant Colonel Noble S. L. McInnes, 2nd Texas Infantry; Major James A. Randall, Anderson's Regiment Cavalry; Captain William Davis, Anderson's Regiment Cavalry; Captain Gus Patton, Anderson's Regiment Cavalry, Company G. Captain George P. Finley, PACS, is appointed Judge Advocate of the court. No other officers than those named can be assembled without manifest injury to the service. Should any of the members of the court be absent, the court will nevertheless proceed with and transact the business before it, provided the number present be not less than the minimum prescribed by law. Nick Hardeman's case was delayed for some unknown reason. His older brother, D. Jr., was able to get leave and tried to get him additional civilian legal representation. He visited Thomas M. Jack, Thomas Pitt Ballinger's law partner, on October 21st, who then contacted Ballinger, who was out of town at that point. D. Hardeman came to see me this morning, got his leave extended, goes to Hempstead to see J.W., is anxious for you to appear in defense of his brother. Ballinger arrived home within the week and wrote in his diary on the 26th, unless Horace Cone could go to Brenham, I must certainly go to defend Nick Hardeman before a court-martial, and must go up today. Cone wrote me this morning he couldn't go, and I wrote to D.H., D. Hardeman Jr., and to Scott Anderson I would go up tomorrow. It puts me to great inconvenience, but I do not feel that I can with propriety decline considering any relations towards the Hardeman family. I wouldn't that he be dishonored or seriously punished for any earthly consideration, and shall spare no effort to preserve him. On Thursday, October 27th, Ballinger traveled to Brenham to assist on Nick's case. He found that the charges had not yet been received, nor would they be the following day. He wrote in his diary, I saw Nick Hardeman. He's a fine, noble boy, one of the last I have ever seen to commit a conscious wrong. He was lying sick. His brother D was there also. He had employed John Woods Harris, and it turned out that Colonel Leonard Gross caused me to be telegraphed for. Harris also favored the employment of Jabez Deming Giddings, which was done, though G did not seem to consider it necessary or to enter into the case with much interest. I conferred with H fully, left him to heart with written memos of my views, and left Saturday. I wrote Harris yesterday, which is November 6th, fully as to Hardeman's case. He wants me to go up, but this is impossible. Court will set the 17th. In the meantime, several witnesses were summoned. Lieutenant Colonel Philip Fulcrod, Mr. Drabney, Provost Marshal at Milliken, Privates R. Jones, E. Nelson, and T. Dunn of Nix Company H, Captain W.B. Caulfield, Lieutenant W.H. Randall, and Private R. Crump of Company K. I've not found any detailed account of Nick Hardeman's trial for desertion, but the final results were published on December 29th. He was one of 4 men tried at the same time as a result of the same incident. Privates J.H. Herron of Company I and William Reed of Company K, who deserted and did not return to their posts, that was their charge, were found guilty and given 3 months hard labor under guard. Private Ed Schertz of Company D, who deserted and remained absent until arrested, was found guilty and given 3 months hard labor with ball and chain under guard. The specification against 2nd Lieutenant Nick Hardeman, Company H, Anderson's Regiment, Texas Cavalry, CS Army, read that he did on or about the 20th day of July, 1864, his regiment being stationed at Camp Ford near Tyler, Texas, desert the service of the Confederate States in company with about 100 men of his own and other companies of his regiment, and did not return to his command, to which charge and specification the accused pleaded not guilty. The findings and sentence of the court to the specification, guilty. To the charge, guilty. And the court do therefore sentence the said 2nd Lieutenant G.N. Hardeman, Company H, Anderson's Regiment, Texas Cavalry, to be cashiered, forfeit all pay and emoluments due him from the Confederate States, and that he be turned over to the enrolling officer for conscription. The findings were confirmed, and Nick was simply released from confinement. I thought that was a rather lenient sentence, but when I looked in Ella Long's book, Desertion During the Civil War, she notes that at least through 1862, desertion by a commissioned officer entailed only being dropped from the rolls in disgrace and danger of conscription at a private. It clearly paid to be an officer. Also have a little influence on the side. Nick Hardeman does not show up again in any official military paperwork, although he evidently does return to the Army in a different regiment. On February 5th, 1865, Sam Hardeman, Nick's brother-in-law, wrote to his wife from Camp Ford, stating that he had arrived on January 26th after a long trip through bad weather and bad roads from beyond the Bernard River. Brown's Cavalry, now part of cousin Major General William Polk Hardeman's brigade, B's Division, Wharton's Cavalry Corps of the Trans-Mississippi, had been temporarily assigned to guard duty until the reserves could be assembled and armed. Where was Nick? Sam wrote, Nick plays the fiddle on one side of me and Lieutenant Bemahan the other. He was back at Camp Ford guarding prisoners. Once more, but this time under the watchful eye of his brother-in-law and under the ultimate command of his cousin. He was not just visiting, because on March 28th, Sam wrote from Brazos County that Nick says you must tell Betsy he is well and hearty and received her letter with which he was much delighted. Tell her he says he is going to apply for a 30-day furlough pretty soon and come and see her. Nick sends howdy to you and Ellen and Johnny and Bailey and all the folks. Evidently he got his furlough, one way or the other, because he was at his mother's home, probably in Burleson County, by the second week of April, 1865. We're at the end of the war. He was not mentioned in Sam's letter of May the 3rd. A biographical sketch of D. Hardeman Jr. states that after the war, when he returned to the once magnificent domain of his father, he found it laid waste by the ruthless hand of the war and the family scattered. If it was truly laid waste, it was from inattention, not because of any sort of federal invasion, and the family was only scattered between Burleson County and Matagorda County. According to this sketch, nothing daunted, he with his brother and that was probably William Perkins Hardiman, although it could have been Nick, rented a farm and undertook the task of tilling the soil themselves. On December 29, 1865, the San Antonio Daily Herald announced that Nick Hardiman had been found dead on November 29th, 5 miles from LaGrange, on the Lyonsville Road at the crossing of the Navidad. It stated that he had evidently come to his death by foul means. He was only 19. Who killed Nick and why? Where is he buried? I have not been able to find the answers to these questions. I checked the district court records in LaGrange for about 4 or 5 years after the murder, and I've not found anyone brought to trial. Nick never married and had no children, so there are no direct descendants for me to ask, although I'm tracking down members of the extended family to check letters and diaries covering 1864 and 1865. This remains a project in progress. And just within the last week or so, I've had a long phone call with one of the family members from Washington, D.C., and there exists another one of his sisters, besides the one that's been writing all these letters. She kept a diary during the war, and she wrote letters during the war that survived. And that's the next thing, to try to find those. Thank you. Anybody have any questions on it? Yes?
Why did he desert? Was there any kind of...
Don't know. It does not show up in letters. In fact, only in one point will the family letters actually say the word desert. There's just the troubles he's in. We won't actually name what he's done. So we don't know, but I suspect that it was just more than he had banked. A lot of them had banked on when they joined the Army.
How come you weren't able to get the record of the trial?
As far as I know, they don't exist. There is the printed version of the results, but we never, when we were in D.C. and in any other case, I've not found any transcript of anything. That's not too unusual in Trans-Mississippi Confederate records. We're lucky to get what we've found, really. A lot of these records just, his military records, this unit that he originally joined, there are no records for Full Cross Cadet Cavalry, period. And the records for this Anderson Borders Cavalry start in September of 1864 after the desertion. So you're having to go back and do a lot of sort of reconstruction. I went through every member of that unit's military records to look for correspondence, and that's where I found some of the history of that unit and how I knew what they were doing in the spring, because otherwise there were no records at all. Yes?
Any indication of their destination?
There was a lot of...
west.
They were going west. There was a lot of discontent on the western frontier. They didn't figure that there's not a lot of Army presence over there. They could get lost on the western frontier. They could also go to Dallas and head south outside the frontier line to Mexico if they wanted to, and get totally out of the entire situation. But on the western frontier during the war, particularly about that time, there were a lot of discontented people, men, hiding out from conscript officers in places like Jernigan's Thicket and in Van Zandt County, for that matter, and then particularly on the western frontier. They could go join up or just lose themselves until the war was over. Yes?
Have you seen any illustration, portrait, early photograph of this young man?
No, but the man in D.C. thinks he's got one. And so he's working on another project right now, and so in the future I hope to have a photograph of Nick. I do have copies of photographs of his parents, but I do not have a photograph of him. He just seems like, I don't know, maybe a spoiled little rich boy that just couldn't hack it. It wasn't bad. He wasn't a bad boy. He just wasn't cut out to be a guard at Camp Ford.
This 100 soldiers that deserted with them, or 160, whatever it was, what percentage of the guards there at Camp Ford did that represent?
We don't know. It's very difficult to know anything much about the guards at Camp Ford. We know a lot more about the federal soldiers that were there than we do about the guards. Many of them were not they were in state service, and there's not a lot of good records on the guards. We pick up a lot of information on guards because they later got Confederate pensions. And they will certify that they were at Camp Ford, and they had 2 other guys that would swear that they saw him at Camp Ford because they were also at Camp Ford. And we pick up guards just here and there information about them. But I don't No, Randy, have you any clue? I would say they were,
They would have represented a significant percentage of the guard force.
Yes. It scared them pretty bad.
Guard and a half, probably.
Yeah.
It's interesting that today we're still hearing discontent among traffic guards.
All right, yes. It's not an easy
One of the
job.
political issues of the Senate race.
But the difference is this bunch is hired out for it, and the others didn't.
Any other questions? Just one of those little interesting stories associated with Camp Ford. There are many, many of those little interesting stories that have to do with Camp Ford.
Vicki, one knows that Horace Cone was one of the more prominent lawyers in Texas and had just concluded representing John Bankhead Magruder in his contempt action with the Supreme Court, held Magruder in contempt. So he was from Houston and probably one of the top 5 lawyers in the state.
The other, one of the top 5 would be William Pitt Ballinger. Brand new biography of him just published by the Texas State Historical Association. One of the top, and his law partner, Thomas Jack, who was associated with the Bryan family, which was Stephen F. Austin's family, they knew the top people of Texas and pulled them all in to help on this. Anybody they could get. Politics don't change.
Sounds like one of those convoluted things of privilege in the English Army at that period. You know, if you were belonged to the right people, it didn't matter what you did.
That's basically it. And as far as why he was killed, we don't know. It could have been just a simple robbery. He could have smarted off to the wrong person as a 19-year-old kid. Who knows? Hoping that this diary may get some more information. That's what I'm looking for, is correspondence about, you know, poor Nick, he deserted and this is what happened, he did it because of this, or poor Nick, he just got killed, we heard it was about that, something like that. So we're still looking.
2 questions, if
Okay.
if the first one's correct. During the Civil War, were people authorized to pay instead of being drafted? If you were drafted, you could pay so much and have someone else go for you.
First part of the war, you could do that.
And I was going to say, you might have some of this bunch out here that can't afford like that, but those do seem like too many people trying to leave, you know. But it's at 4 or 5, I think they mentioned there. But when you lose half the guard, if they were trying to leave, they'd scatter like a covey of quails.
Well, these, all except for, you know, they got most of them all at one time. They were, I guess they thought there might be more power as a group, that they wouldn't be approached. I don't know, like, you know, a monster gang or something.
I enjoyed the lecture.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you very much, Vicki. That really was an aspect that I've never heard anything about at all. And I keep thinking they talked about some of those men who were their commanding officers, like Nick Ephraim, who was so unpleasant. He might have been one of those real disciplinarians that nobody likes. And when they had a place to run, they ran.
Could have had a bunch of my in-laws there too.
Well, and you know, I'm wondering about the cone. There was a cone who came later to Gresham and Noonday, was buried down at Noonday, who was a colonel who was in the Alabama, head of the Alabama Quartermaster's Division. And I wonder if this is the same family of cones. At any rate, what we would like to talk about now, I want Carol, and thank you very much for the lovely refreshments. Carol, will you come tell people about what we're going to do for Christmas?
I know we just had Halloween, but our next meeting will be the last of the year, and we wanted to celebrate the holiday season with a Christmas dinner. The Smith County Historical Society will provide a ham and a turkey for our dinner, and we're going to ask our members to bring the accompanying dishes to go with it. There's a place to sign up over there if you want to bring a bread or a salad or a vegetable or a dessert or whatever, and if you'll put your phone number by your name, I'll call and give you a reminder. And we've had quite a number of guests. All of you guests are welcome to join us as well. There will be an announcement in the next newsletter you receive, and it will have an RSVP date on it, so we can get a head count and we'll know how much turkey and how much ham to order.
Gonna be here.
Yes, it will be here, sure. First Tuesday, same regular meeting.
So if we don't know for sure what other reasons whether we're gonna be here or not, let me know.
Sure. Everybody might have to check their calendar. I know those Christmas invitations are coming in already, but get back to us and let us know if you'll be here. Thanks.
I think we'll have a good time. We'll decorate a lot, and while we're not expert caterers, we think we know somebody that can cook the meat very well. We've been told. So I hope that all of you will come, that you'll contact the rest of the members of the society, and that we have a really good, big crowd to come and celebrate our Christmas dinner together. And I have a letter here from Mary Lewis, the Social Sciences Department at Jacksonville College in Jacksonville, who is offering a Texas history travel study program in May and June. And you might like to come read about this. There are going to be classes and then trips, several different trips scattered over a several-week period that might be lots of fun. And if you didn't grow up with somebody who taught Texas history all of her life and dragged you at every free moment to every historic Texas place, you may not have seen some of these places. You might like to go. They sound very interesting. So if you'd like to come look at this, feel free to do so. Are there any further announcements?
Mary Jane,
Yes.
I want to donate for a plank fund. If anybody wants to join me, I'm going to start something over here, so as you leave, if anybody wants to
And
donate.
if the city pays for the whole thing, we'll be able to do some of the other very needed things with the money. So your generosity will be appreciated.
And thank you, Mom. It's the city of
Any further announcements? If not, I declare this meeting adjourned until the next duly scheduled meeting, first Tuesday of December, when we're going to celebrate. Hope to see you all.
That's a true statement. So there's lots of things that the steering committee does, and as the chair that's got has the expertise on the committee. When you look at the makeup of the committee, it has the county's attorney and the purchasing agent, the auditor, the county judge, one commissioner, and the head of the super users group, which happens to be Becky. Those meetings, is not always, but in the past, but now they're all posted, open meetings. The media is there oftentimes, so it's not anything that's done underhanded, and it's not anything that's done without the openness and without with the vendor making the recommendations and saying you shall do this, or you shall do this, you shall do this. Oftentimes the committee does ask the vendor, is this necessary? Is it necessary to do this? The vendor oftentimes come back and said, no, I don't recommend it. This is a request that came in from Department ABC. And that's happened. Again, I think that can all be confirmed. In a business organization, the upper management is not always a technical person that understands the day-to-day operation. But when you have a committee that's put together, like this steering committee, that does on a weekly basis review everything that happens with our outsourced data processing, I think it's adequately covered. I don't see the need personally of hiring an $80,000, so the county spending an additional 70, 80, I don't know what it would cost to hire an IS director. John, just not asking you to reveal your salary, but ballpark, what is the in-house?
You're right in the ballpark, sir.
Yours was published in the newspaper, but I've forgotten what it was, John.
So, ballpark, we're talking 80,000 plus or minus, and plus or minus benefits on top of that. So again, my number one concern, as always, is spending taxpayer money, and spending taxpayer money wisely. If that's a need, then fine. If it's a need when we outsource something to hire an in-house director, then fine, if that's what the Corps wants to do. We've outsourced I've always used an analogy, we outsource medical for the jail. Along the same lines, is it necessary to hire an RN or a doctor to oversee that operation, to be sure that it's done correct? When at the sheriff's office, they've got a committee that oversees the operation of that outsource. I think our committee does fine. Now, with that said, I do think and do feel that it would be advantageous for the county to hire a consultant, have a consultant on a retainer, consultant that can come in periodically or whenever and keep a review on what's going on, help us be sure that we're abiding by, the vendors abiding by it, whether our future vendor is GRS or John Doe Association, if we continue to outsource. But that's my thoughts about item 24, hiring an information systems director. I would certainly support hiring a consultant, a part-time person, a person that would be available, maybe spend 10 hours a week or 5 hours or 20 hours, whatever the court would so desire. But to pay a person that much money, I just don't see it. Now, that's the opinion. That's my opinion. Now, I will hush. But back to item 20, if we want to, oh, excuse me.
I was just going to follow what you just said. Mr. Deanna, on an hourly basis, what's the ballpark on that? On professional services?
Well, to be honest with you, I'd have to sit down with the city manager and the mayor to figure out what they're going to do on their side in regard to me. But it would be somewhere in the neighborhood between $50 and $75.
Well, Judge Craig, let me just respond very briefly to some of your comments. I truly believe that money that if we were to spend, if it cost us $75,000 for an IS director, it would be the best money this county could spend. Because there is no way that the city could be operating as efficiently and be accomplishing what they are accomplishing over there, but for the day-to-day oversight of John Deanna and their technology. I don't think that, having someone come on a part-time basis is going to resolve the problem. And you talk about this committee being in place and overseeing the contract, and you think that it's working just fine. I think you're one of very few in this county who agree with that, because there is no way, I don't believe, that a businessman would have the kind of setup that we have, where you have the vendor is the only expert at the table when you are making these decisions. Now, I'm not saying that this committee has not worked hard and you've done your best to oversee the contract, but you cannot have the expertise that is needed in the decisions that are being made. And GRS has made numerous recommendations to the city. I've listened to the committee meeting tapes long before Mr. Jensen was ever taping them. And that's the regular procedure for the committee. The GRS representative comes to the committee and makes recommendations, and then the committee opts to either go with them or not go with them.
That's not exactly true, Ms. Emery. Now, they make recommendations when they're asked to make a recommendation. I want to commend you, Judge Craig, because it's been a concern I've had all the time. It is incumbent upon this court, whenever somebody says anything that is totally inconsistent with what the facts are, to timely refute it. I can guarantee you that it'll have a different result. I'm very pleased that you have taken the time to tell what the composition of that committee is, who the chairman of it is, and there's one other aspect that you did not cover that I think is that's important. The GRS representative there, when we have to buy products, does not make a recommendation of his product. We have options. We have always had options. And whenever there was a recommendation made from him, it was extracted from him. He doesn't come in making a recommendation. He is responsive to inquiry. I recognize very quickly what my limitations are. And I do respect what he's done from time to time. But this all-out vilification of us has got to cease at some point. It's the same vilification that told us we wouldn't meet the Y2K requirements. It's the same vilifications that said that we would not be able to make the transition to the software packs that we're using now. When does it end? When does it end without some concrete proof? Much of what has been offered here is no better than what we have, speculation. How do you ensure the loyalty of an IS director if you get one. I fail to see all of the justification for the continuing battle that we're having. There's no point in allowing people to be misled, believing that a GRS representative comes in and manipulates 5 people who have more than a casual interest about the concern of this county. Granted that his knowledge might be superior to us in some areas, but I don't think he could eclipse the knowledge that we have about the financial impact and our concern about seeing that the county gets the best deal. I just don't take that indictment lightly.
Oftentimes, and I can
respond to me.
I can say this without a reservation too. Oftentimes, and his boss is not here, but with all due respect to John Deanna, I respect everything you do. I also respect Don Crawford. Don Crawford's one of the most knowledgeable people, one of the most dedicated, concerned people I've ever been around, been noticed, that I've ever worked with. And oftentimes, in conversations with the steering committee and in private conversations, if I were an outsider listening to that, I would wonder if Don worked for Smith County or worked for somebody else. And he makes decisions based on what's best for Smith County. I don't know how we could have an in-house director that would be a better person or have the county's interest more at heart than Don Crawford. Now, true, we've not always had Don Crawford. We may not always have Don Crawford. But while he's here, I would not trade anything that's happened under his command. I wouldn't trade any in-house director. I don't think an in-house director would
be any more loyal. I don't either.
I just wanted to respond, Mr. Melantree. I think that there's no vilification going on here, and I think that is a gross exaggeration of anything that's been
my
said.
interpretation of it is wrong, but I can assure you, there's nothing complimentary either. The antithesis of complimentary is what I meant.
Well,
it's vilification.
I think that there's no vilification going on up here, and the only comment that I was making regarding the judge's remarks about the committee, he said the committee has the expertise to make these decisions. I absolutely do not agree with that, because there is no one on the committee.
On the county needs, not technology, on the county needs. Now, when the technology is presented to Becky, and I'm not saying because she's here, probably is one of the most knowledgeable computer people we have working.
That's right. Becky Crawford, and I'm glad she's on
she knows. And we look at these things. We don't look at the bits and bytes and megahertz and all these other words that I don't even know what means. But we can see what the end product is. What is this going to produce? This is what we want. Mr. Crawford, will this do ABC? That's all I want to know. And that's the expertise that Becky and Andrew and Jim and Denise have. We know what we want.
I truly believe that if you go out into the business community and you ask a businessman, are you going to have someone overseeing a contract that has no expertise in that area? No businessman is going to have the vendor as the only one at the table with the expert knowledge. That is what I'm trying to communicate to the court, is where I have a disagreement with the position that you were taking regarding the consultant. We definitely need to hire a consultant for this interim to determine where we are to develop a strategic plan. But I would oppose us having just a part-time consultant on a long-term basis, because there is absolutely no substitute for that day-to-day interaction between an expert in this field and the ones who are overseeing this contract. And I think in the long term, that is where we ought to move.
You look at these costs, these are actual true numbers. If we'd had a IS in-house director, I don't know how we could have saved one penny more than that. But anyway, that we can debate all day long. We've got 2 action items. We've got some other items on here. First item is item 20. We've got a recommendation of the steering committee. Now, the only question to that is how we're going to hire that consultant. GRS has agreed, and we'll get a addendum to the contract for a 90-day extension. Now, do we want to hire this person, just hire them through the professional services, or do we want to do RFPs or RFQs, whichever is required, and to see who, with all due respect to Mr. Deanna, and what Mr. Harwood said. There may be some other folks out there that have the same expertise as Mr. Deanna. He wouldn't be a city employee, but I mean, there may be another person that understands city and county government out there. And again, I don't mean that. No, you don't.
I don't disagree.
But we can do that. We can enter into an agreement with Mr. Deanna, or we can enter into an agreement. I know there's a gentleman that's been up here and talked to us a number of times, Earl Mueller. And I've had resumes from Mr. Mueller. I know he's got a good background. He's made himself available. There may be others. So again, item 20, we have a recommendation of the steering committee. I'll entertain the motion.
Well, I would move that we hire John Deanna because of the possibility of the city and county working together because of, not only his history with the city, but his expertise. I would recommend that we hire John Deanna as a consultant at this time to help us develop a long-range plan. And beyond that, make a decision later as to the IS.
90 days, 90-day consultant. Your recommendation would be John Deanna.
With an open fee?
With
He hadn't even
a
given his fee yet.
With a cap of $75
Well,
an hour.
I think based on that, that's a bargain.
Can I, see, because I thought that is a bargain.
That's a bargain, absolutely.
With a cap of $75 an hour for 90 days, contingent upon written approval from
Okay.
the city council
I'll accept
members
that
or
amendment to
Pickney
my
Butlers. Or, I don't know, from the city council members
Okay.
or Pickney Butler.
Okay.
Does that motion also include that we ask for the 90-day extension of GRS?
Yes, it
Have our
does.
RFPs done?
Yes,
to
it
comply
does.
with-
I appreciate that, yes.
And the 90-day extension, and do what?
GRS is agreed, if you read the recommendation on number 3, recommendation steering committee, GRS has agreed to extend their contract for 90 days with no additional cost.
Yeah,
Yeah, well, that's fine, except that, we need the 90-day extension at this point. If we are going to hire Mr. Deanna for 90 days to help us develop a plan.
You don't have time to get a
Well,
plan,
yeah,
RFPs,
all right, I'll
go up.
include that in the motion then.
Yeah,
Let's,
that's-
90-day extension and.
That takes us through end of September.
That-
End of September.
And October 1.
So I amended her motion, call for question.
Was there a second?
I second. And she accepted my amendment.
Motion made and second. Again, discussion, my only thing under discussion is if we're going against what we've done in the past and said, "Look, let's don't ever just hire somebody, let's always go out and see who's out there."
That's true. Well,
I still feel strong about that with all respect.
I should hope that nobody believes we rehearsed this, but those are my thoughts also. With all due respect to Mr. Deanna, it would be going against precedent. It'd be going against what we've already done. And I think it'd be setting a very dangerous precedent. It seems like inside dealing to me. And any such impression of impropriety should be avoided by us. Now, we have limited the number of perhaps qualified people, along with Mr. Deanna, who could be considered by having an exclusive rendering of a contract or an arrangement with him. I don't think that's what you want to do. If you do, you're bound to repeat it in future actions. Otherwise, we'll be called to task to say, why not?
But the statute allows us to do it under professional services. Is that right?
Statute allows,
Absolutely.
wait a
Is that
minute,
not right?
I'm chairing the court.
I'm sorry.
I say, Mr. Holden.
Somebody that might like to speak when you're.
I'm gonna make mine very simple. I do not choose to foreclose the opportunity for other persons who are like qualified as Mr. Deanna to fulfill our needs here.
And I would certainly hope that if we do this, and it doesn't, the motion doesn't carry, I would certainly hope that Mr. Deanna would submit us a proposal. I don't know if the city will allow you to do that now, but if we do ask for requests for qualifications, I would certainly hope that you would be one of the people that make yourself available.
Let's see how we can avoid that responsibility
Well,
of
let me
being for
just say
sure
that I think
as best we can.
that Mr. Deanna is not going to do that under those circumstances. I
Well,
think
don't
we-
speak for Mr. Deanna. He shook his,
he's
the way he
already
just shook
stated-
his head.
He's already said he would not. And I think that we are missing out on an opportunity here
What
for
we're
us
doing
to.
is business as we always have done it.
Mr. Military, we have good cause to take this course
We
right now.
often have good
because-
cause to do things a certain way.
Because we have an opportunity
Well,
here
I would not like to
to
believe
tap
that.
into an expertise that we're not going to get elsewhere. And I think we.
I don't know, with all due respect to Mr. Deanna, you're telling me he is totally exclusive?
I'm saying.
And I don't think he disagrees with us.
I think Mr. Deanna has insight into how the city and county can work together on this
You know
project
what,
that no one else is
that would be a
going to
good
have.
argument if we had other proposals before us, Ms. Emerson.
And it's gonna cost us a whole lot more money if we go the other
Well, I
route.
mean, well, I've heard that admonishment a lot of times too.
Definitely will.
It's, we often do things that cost us more money. Becky, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Your Honor. With all due respect to the way that it's been done in the past, and I know that's a good thing to do, to go out for proposals and go out for bids. I think, as was discussed in the committee last week, we have an obligation under the current time constraints to make as quick a decision as we can. And I know we're allowed by statute to go under professional services and hire someone. As I said, I certainly don't disagree with the procedure we've used in the past, but I think we have a unique situation here in that we are really under a short fuse, so to speak. And I think we need to go ahead and move forward. Again, not to repeat myself, but I think we also have a unique opportunity, since Mr. Deanna has offered his services and his expertise, to go ahead and move forward with hiring him to do that.
And I certainly don't disagree with that, but the next time we have the same opportunity, will we do the same thing? I know we've had similar opportunities in years past. We'd say, look, we can do this, we can do it right now, and we've opted not to.
You know, I would respectfully disagree with Ms. Dempsey here in so far as our reference to time constraints, because we have done an additional 3 months extension without any cost in time, which has eliminated essentially the time constraints that we all feared.
Right.
Judge, I kind of hate to get into this, but I happen to have a son who happens to be a network engineer, network administrator, and has all the credentials that you're looking for too. I do realize that the city doesn't have any district courts, and so we're not talking about the way the county runs or the way the city runs. What we're talking about is technology. We're talking about networking, we're talking about mainframes, we're talking about fiber optic, running computer wire. And so I just soon have my son have an opportunity to bid on the contract.
I would too.
Anyway, we'll call for the question. Have a motion made and second to ask GRS to extend 90 days, hire Mr. Deanna to help develop specs and draft a strategic plan for information services. And that information services strategic plan would be incorporated into RFPs. And those, we'd have that RFPs ready to go out and come back and return and awarded by October 1 of 2000. I understand that's the motion and second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no.
No, no.
Chair votes no. Again, Mr. Deanna, with all due respect, and I certainly hope if we do it the other way, that you will give us an option to employ you. And I hope you understand why I voted no. Now we have, there's another motion on item 20. The motion would be to accept the recommendation of the steering committee and to draft specs to hire an outside
I make that recommendation, I make that motion, consistent with the recommendation of the steering committee. I'll second it.
Motion made and seconded. Would it be okay to add the caveat that at our next meeting, we have the agenda item to hire a consultant? Or can we hire the consultant?
We could do it any process you want, but in particular, it sounds like you're headed towards the process of doing an RFQ and trying to get all of the proposed consultants to respond.
That's true. RFQ would be the desired process, as far as I'm concerned.
So your motion includes RFQ on our next agenda?
Right, absolutely.
That motion, is there a second?
Second.
Discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no.
No.
Chair votes aye, motion carried. John, thank you very, very much. I really do hope you consider, because we'd like to have your expertise there. We need you.
How could we hire about needing no qualification? We don't even have these qualifications for us. Well, just because we're dumb, we still be dumb.
No secrets? We'll go back to agenda item number 2, various department head reports. We'll place in the record the Crime Victim Services press release that has been released by Miss Betty Whitten. Also, I'd like to place in the record and give a great big attaboy to Bill McGinnis. I don't know if any of you got a copy of the Census 2000. The Smith County has come in big time as far as the completion of census.
7 out of 9.
Second out of 9. And the national rate is 62% with a target of 70%. The Texas rate was 58% with a target of 66%. All of the entities, with the exception of Lindale and Noonday, are there. Lindale and Noonday are within 1%. Did you get a copy of this, Jennifer? And so the big thing I'd like to say on this is give the media a copy of it. Is the congratulations are in order. Thank you, Judge Craig, the Smith County Commissioners Court, and underlined on here, Smith County Complete Count Committee Chairman Bill McGinnis for helping promote the importance of this census to Smith County residents. So Bill did an outstanding job on this, worked hard, and helped us achieve this. And personally, I'd like to say thanks, Bill.
Yeah, thank you.
I'd like to place that in the record.
Just fed us one day too.
Yeah, you can tell when we've had lunch.
Thanks to a local restaurateur for the meeting.
That's what did it.
We can get the rest to us for this all the briefs, you know.
Also, a place in the record, the investment summary for advisory committee from the Treasurer's Office. Item 3 is consider approval of accounts due.
Move approval.
Second.
Discussion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carried. Item 4, various budget transfer requests. We have one from Judge Getz, all within his budget. He is deleting his Westlaw, his computer legal research line item, said he wasn't using it enough to justify it. But in turn, he's asking for a pager. He's had a pager that belongs to volunteer fire department. He's inactive in the volunteer fire department now, so he's asking for a pager.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carried. Item 5, various budget transfers. Have 2037, 2038, 2039, and 2040.
Judge Craig, on 40, could we pull that one out?
Okay, take up 27, 38, 39.
40.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I so move on the others.
Discussion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carried. 40 has to do with the hiring of the salary survey. And of course, the contract was for $24,009 with the additional expenses. Denise, I know, just had done some kind of educated ballpark, 37, 35, and 21, 25. Our job, or just estimates that may or may not be expended. The contract itself is $24,905.
I was just curious about something Mr. Harwood brought up. Did you have any prior knowledge of that? Did you, Mr. Harwood, talk about that?
Well, there's,
I was
you
not
can get
aware
all
of
this
that.
information. You can get all that. Most of you remember what I said about this last week. As a businessman, this was not budgeted. And you can take this $25,000 with all due respect, I'll use this word respect again. You can give the road and bridge people a tremendous merit increase with how many people over there? 80 people that work. You know, as a bonus, we can't do bonus. It's what the state won't allow us.
Well, let me make a comment about that. We had this was before the court. The court unanimously voted to go out and ask for these RFPs. We had an idea because we had one person that had given us an estimate of about $50,000. The court agreed to go forward. We've gone forward. Lots and lots of work is going. You know, if we were going to say that, we should have said that up front. The court has already awarded the contract.
Well,
it's
that
going
was
to
my
take this. We awarded the contract last meeting, and this transfers to funding.
Yeah, okay, that was the question I had. You know, based on the vote last week, we've actually already awarded the contract, so it wouldn't do us any good to try to find out about that information.
That's right. I mean, I'll talk to the Waters Group and see if they can use some of it and reduce the fee, but
That would be
as far
good.
as I can tell, you know, the real work the water group's gonna be doing is looking at county jobs and looking at those descriptions and trying to make those fit those other outside jobs.
Yeah.
Which raw data from Workforce Administration may or may not help in that.
Well, I was not aware of exactly what he was talking about, and of course, I was concerned last week about the amount, because I didn't expect it to cost this much, even though I know.
No, we had, the proposal we had up front was like $50,000.
Well, what proposal
But
up
before
front?
we had Nash
yeah.
sent us a deal, he
Yeah,
said he
that's-
could do this, and his figure was like $47,000.
That's the reason we rejected it.
But then we said, well, we won't hire him on a professional services contract, which we could have, we'll do RFP. And we did, we came back and awarded him. So we knew a ballpark what it was gonna be.
But at any rate, I just was curious about the information that was available, because I was not aware of that, and if that's, something they could use, I mean, certainly we ought to go for it.
It appears just to be raw data, which is helpful, but comparing that down to the job level individually that's where the real expertise comes in. That's from reading all of
Entertain a
it.
motion on 22,040.
I'll make a motion.
Discussion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carried. Item 6, be no action. Item 7, personnel. First one under personnel, Ms. Dempsey has a request for reclassifying her 2 people in her office. Becky, you want to address this? Actually, it's the same